Hi, I'm Tarek Kholoussy, and I am American, born and raised in the States, mostly raised near Philadelphia, and spent a lot of time in New York City. Yeah. And then in the last few years, I've been traveling around the world, so I like to think of myself more as a global citizen now. My family's originally from Egypt.
Oh, that's where the name comes from.
Yes, exactly. I don't have quite the same interesting story as you, but...
I must disagree with that statement. Tarek has an extremely interesting story. His life had taken a big turn a few years back, and today you'll hear about that. Well, actually, Tarek has so much to share that this is going to be a two-parter. So this is the first half of Tarek's story, and get ready to meet a super interesting guy. This is a story about change, about goals being fulfilled, signs from the universe, and a bit of serendipity. I just love that word, serendipity. That's the act of finding something valuable or delightful when you're not looking for it. And another reason that this is a two-parter is that this has been recorded partly in Brazil and partly in Bali. We start in Bali, where I'm at the beach having a cold beer with my good friend Tarek.
Oh, Tarek, now we're here, and I cannot believe it. We met on the Nomad cruise from Barcelona to Brazil a little more than a year ago, and you did the best opening keynote so far, and it was totally TED-worthy, and I really enjoyed it. And actually, you told me that it was one of the first time you did something like that.
Well, thank you so much, Pale. I'm so happy to meet with you again. And yeah, actually, that was my first public talk ever.
Not the public, really?
First one ever, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the feedback. I put a lot of heart into it. Opening up your life story and being vulnerable to a large group is a fear that I'm proud to overcome.
Yeah, and we'll get into the whole story and what it's about, because during the cruise, I said to you so many times, we became good friends, and I said we need to sit down and do a chat for the podcast, and it just never happened. So much was happening all the time, and you were busy with the project. And then we came to Brazil, and we actually managed to sit down. But that interview was never published for so many boring reasons. One of them being, I felt the sound quality wasn't perfect. I've just listened to it, and you're going to hear it and be the judge of it. It's not that bad. It could be better, but it's not that bad. And then also, the whole thing of your life change was so new that you haven't even talked about it publicly yourself, just to us other nomads. So you asked me, can you hold up a bit?
Yeah, and it's funny because... just as you said, the noise wasn't great. Two people drove off on a scooter with their engines blowing.
Doesn't matter. And we're by the beach. You might be able to hear the ocean. Let's be quiet a while. Yeah, see, now all you can hear is a noisy scooter. But I promise you, the beach is here. And then we both moved on, and so much happened. And actually, we went to Rio, and we did some more recordings, and something about the project that you hear more about in a few seconds. And then, it never came out. So I thought, but I always planned that it should be used at some point, and this is the time, because... this is where we do a follow-up. First, let's listen to what we actually talked about back then, and then let's catch up and see what's happened since.
I look forward to it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Cheers again.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
Before we jump to Brazil, let me describe Tarek for you. He's got long hair tied up in a man-bun and a short beard. He's always wearing relaxed and colorful clothes, often a t-shirt with very colorful decorations, and always wearing bands on his arms. I feel describing him is relevant for you to get a mental picture of what he looks like, because it was very different a few years earlier when he was a corporate employee on Wall Street in New York City. He was working for Goldman Sachs and trading stocks, so he wore a tie.
Oh, unfortunately, that tie was choking me, literally and figuratively.
It's just so hard for me to see you with a tie. I could not imagine that.
Oh, I had short hair, clean shaven. I was pale, overweight, and a tie. And you can't see me, but I'm pretty much the opposite now.
Before we really get into the talk with Tarek, let me remind you that this episode is partly supported by Hotels25.com. It's a website that you can use as a tool when you're starting to travel again. Hotels25 searches a bunch of the biggest hotel search sites in the world and helps you find the best deals on a place to stay. So, Tarek used to be a corporate employee, or as he put it himself,
I'm a ex-corporate slave, and a few years ago sort of decided to take a big leap of faith and
got the chains off.
Cut the chains off the golden handcuffs, as they say. It happened twice. First time 6 years ago, second time 4 years ago.
Okay.
I did go get escaped and got sucked back in. And then, so I got more into social causes and social impact that I found way more meaningful for me personally than what I was doing in my old corporate life. And I got more into adventure and nature and into running races around the world. And
you do a lot of marathons.
Yeah, I kind of got addicted to it. It's funny. Ironically, I was a lifetime smoker since I was a kid, like 23 years. And after a while, I realized it wasn't really serving me well. So I got into running and got into this sort of addictive nature of saying, oh, can I go a little further? Can I go a little further this time? And I found that it was helping, it had good positive side effects. And
was that a competitive part of you that you also had in your corporate life?
Yes and no. I like to think that I'm not that competitive with others, to be honest with you. I think in New York, maybe the median has shifted a little bit more than the typical person around the world. So maybe I don't think I am, but I probably am globally. But in general, I'm very competitive with myself. So if I set a goal, I have this sort of commitment to myself that I want to keep it, because if I miss one or two or too many, then I'm afraid I won't keep any.
So the first time you sort of got the travel bug, how did that happen?
Right around the same time of these, like a few month period in 2012, a few different events happened. One was I was just walking in the East Village in Manhattan where I lived, and I bumped into a stranger who was struggling to move her boxes, and I went up and helped her. And we made some small talk, and she explained to me that she was shipping her boxes to her parents' home because she realized after traveling around the world for a year that she loved her new life so much that she wanted to keep going. And she shared specifically that now that she completed her dream of traveling 100 countries, she was now ready to take on her next goal, her next dream, which was to create a social enterprise. And I thought to myself, what? This is my dream life. You know, to see someone who escaped the corporate world to go see the real world, I didn't know that was a possibility. And I mean, sure, we know it, but to feel it, to see it was a different story. Mm-hmm. And then a few other things happened, both sad and positive. On the sad side, my cousin, who's roughly my age, suddenly died. Oh. And that made me realize just, sooner or later I was going to die too. Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, which caused hundreds of deaths. And a blackout where I lived for 4 days in Manhattan.
Yeah, we saw that from the outside. And oh my God, New York without power, it's insane.
Exactly, especially a place like New York City. It felt like Armageddon, all those movies. But then I was supposed to run my first marathon that weekend in New York City, which was canceled for the first time in its history. 2 weeks later, I ran it in Philadelphia, my first one. And I think I like to think of it as the two sad, tragic situations that happened made me feel like I was alive. And the two positive situations with meeting someone's dream life for me and running my first marathon made me feel like, hey, maybe I can go live my dream life too. And so that was the decision point where I decided to take a leap of faith and leave everything behind. And in the US, especially in New York, in the corporate world, when you leave a corporate job, it could be a death sentence. At least that's the reputation.
If you're one of those people that have shared this podcast on social media, or maybe just told a friend out there in real life, I just want to say thank you so much. That means so much to me. Thank you so much.
How was the decision process? Was it right after you spoke to the lady with the boxes that been to 100 countries? It was right after that?
You know, that was a trigger. But I think in reality, I look back and I realized how conditioned I was by society and expectations. But you get to choose your own society to some extent. And I was in a certain bubble where it was very difficult to change my way of thinking that it's okay to do that. Mm-hmm. And so what I found was by exposing myself to different environments gradually, like I would go volunteer abroad in a developing country for a week and then go back to my normal life in New York, helping rich guys get richer, you know. Frankly, there wasn't a lot of heart in it. No offense to anyone who's in that world. I mean, I did it for my entire adult life. So I'm just saying that it wasn't aligned with my true self. Mm. And I started to get exposure to different things around the world. And again, those examples I just gave, that sort of like just shook me and woke me up and snapped me out of swimming upstream in a life that wasn't aligned with the way I deep inside thought my life was supposed to be about.
Tell me about the process of when you made the decision and up until you took off. Were you questioning your decision, or were you feeling a sense of I'm getting out of my comfort zone, or what went through your mind?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you're bringing me back to the moment because I haven't really thought. I think about it, but not that in depth. I'm remembering that I felt that I didn't really have anyone to talk to about this particular decision because meeting people like Chrissy, that woman in the street, that wasn't in my life. So when I would go do a volunteer project abroad, I would really bond and connect with people that were thinking like me, but they weren't my real friends. They were just temporary friends. Mm-hmm. So I remember thinking I felt lonely, like I didn't fit in. And so I started drowning myself in inspirational videos, books about how to become happy. I did a virtual TED conference from my home. I read everything I could about this stuff, and I just got more and more inspired, but not with my immediate community, to be honest. I never thought about it that way. And then when I was making the decision, I decided not to tell anyone. And for me, that wasn't... Well, in the process, I didn't tell anyone. And that's not my style. I typically am pretty open.
I did it completely different. I made the decision, and then for almost 3 years, I was talking about it on Facebook and say, oh, now my plan looks like this. And I put out maps of this is where I plan to be going and so on. So I was very, very public about the decision.
So that's interesting. And did it take you 3 years? Do you think that there was a...
No, that was, I knew that it was in the summer of 16 that I could travel when my youngest would graduate and move out of the house. So that's why I planned it in advance. So I thought, okay, and that was in 2013 that I made the decision. So it was... Up until then, I was just talking about it, and it was always my plan to go traveling on that date in Amazing. July 16, and I ended up doing it. But the reason I ask you about the outer comfort zone, because obviously I sold my house and my car and all my furniture, and as I was selling my furniture piece by piece, and that got more and more echo in my living room, I had a brief moment like 2 months before where I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? This is not right. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to be on my couch, watch House of Cards on Netflix. I don't want to go anywhere. But then after I left, I really haven't regretted a single moment of it.
Amazing. Yeah, I find this particular topic fascinating because I think both are true, and I recommend both. You know, there's some theories that say, and I actually just gave a talk saying this exact point, tell the world.
Yeah.
Because it'll help make it become a reality, you know? And I completely agree with that. Now there's a nuance.
And you also have a commitment because
exactly.
when I said it out loud and this is what I'm going to do, not that I for a moment thought that I wouldn't, but I'm just a sharing kind of guy. It's my style.
Yeah, exactly. And like what I find is that there's a nuance because apparently some studies show that by sharing what you plan to do, and if people give you recognition for that before you do it, you already realize some of the value of that future identity, that future decision, which can be dangerous. Because somebody might say, oh, I plan to start a business one day, or I plan to do this, and they're already getting the value because they're telling people. So overall, I would agree it's good to share future goals. In my situation at that time, it was too risky because I wasn't convicted in my belief.
No.
I easily could have been persuaded against it, especially because the vast majority, maybe everyone would have said, are you sure about that? And I wasn't sure about it.
No.
I took a calculated risk,
Yeah.
but I was not sure of it.
No.
In my heart, I thought it was right, but you know, I didn't want to be easily influenced in the wrong direction.
No.
You're listening to the Radio Vagabond podcast. Before we continue, I want to remind you that I'm also on Instagram. Just search for Radio Vagabond and you'll find a bunch of photos from the places I visit. And now, back to the show.
After those few events happened, both positive in a big way and negative in a big way, I finally made a decision, and I decided to go out with a bang and decided to run a marathon the day before I took off. So I had my last day of employment, and then the next day ran my I think it was my second marathon ever, and then the following day took off abroad. And I did the same thing because I mentioned earlier that I had went on a journey around the world for like a year or so, got sucked back into my corporate life again, and when I decided to redo this, now that I knew what was on the other side, I also planned a big race. It was my longest race, a double marathon in San Francisco the day before I flew abroad, and I went directly to the Taj Mahal.
Okay.
For the first time.
Okay.
And that's when I started my real journey.
That was 4 years earlier. Since then, he's been traveling full time.
Sometimes I go deep into a country or a place for, say, 2, 3, sometimes 6 months. And then sometimes I do a little bit of buffet sampler, where between one place and another place I do 3 days here, 3 days there, especially if it's a small country. And because I did set a big goal for myself. I set 3 goals 1,000 days before turning 40. And I have one for my mind, which is to start a social enterprise, for my body to run 25 marathons, and for my soul to explore 100 countries.
And those 3 goals are now coming true one by one. When we got to Brazil, Tarek had just visited his country number 100.
Yes, it's hard to believe. That's true. And
that was when we were in Cape Verde.
Yeah, Cape Verde. I got to celebrate it with you and our fellow friends. It's funny because I set that goal among 2 other goals 1,000 days before my 40th birthday. And I had a long way to go back then, and I thought this might be a little far-fetched. Kind of like your goal to see every country. You know, a lot of people are impressed, amazed, and some people think I'm just a wacko, which you might understand. And that's okay. But what I realized is that number one, it's not a competition. It does not matter how many countries you go to. But for me, I found that every time...
It's just a question that we always get.
Yes, exactly.
How many did you go to? How many so far? And, so it obviously it is kind of a milestone.
It's a huge milestone. I guess I'm just making the point that the number itself doesn't matter. It's what it represents, and it's a personal goal. So what I realized along the way is that when I go to a new place, I become more aware of my surroundings. I become more present. I engage with more new people. It's kind of like, I'll give you an example. I lived in New York City for a long time. And I used to walk by the best bars, museums, restaurants all the time. And I would just basically be exhausted to come home from work and see everyone having the most amazing time from people all over the world. I never went up to anyone. I never sat down and said, hey, you want to have a chat? You seem interesting. Or went and tried every single thing. I would just go home. Sometimes I'm exhausted and turn on the TV or Netflix. Because it became normal.
Yeah.
So when you travel, every time you go to a new place, you live life with a sense of urgency because you're only there for a certain amount of time and you want to make the most of it. Mm-hmm. And I love that feeling. And I love to question new things around me. So I just found myself becoming more alive, more aware, more present every time I went to a new place. And that's why I didn't want to let go of that goal. And I also didn't want to get sucked back into my old corporate life. And I was afraid, I did that once before. And I thought if I set this big goal and I'm very goal-driven, then I'm sort of committing, I'm not allowing myself to accidentally fall back into the life that I know that I didn't want to live anymore.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels around the world. Hotels25.com.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
So, goal number one, you've achieved that, and the 25 marathons?
Well, the running started shortly before I started traveling. I just found myself getting addicted to the feeling of doing something that I thought was impossible for me. So I never would have imagined I could have run my first 5K or 10K or 21K, and eventually it just kept on growing one by one. And I also found myself having to live healthier to get to those goals. So the side effects were good. And, it was nice for the ego and recognition when you cross that finish line and get a medal. And those little prizes sometimes, it's good for, if it's going to create more positive behaviors, then more the merrier for that type of stuff. And then as I was traveling, I found it a great way to actually meet local people and share a very special moment. Like seeing people maybe running their first race at that distance and their family is celebrating, the hugs and the cries and it's just a very emotional, high energy experience to share. So I've developed some good friendships with bonding moments. Rather than just going to the typical sites, it's a great way to actually get engaged and experience something with local people.
As you're in the middle of a run, are you able to chat to people when you're running, or are you people focused on running and out of breath and all that? I've never done it. That's why I'm asking.
It's a great question. Because I'm a slow runner. I'm not fast. I do sometimes have conversations. I think if you're talking about the higher end, the faster people, no, that's not their style because they care a lot about the time. Most races, I just went across the finish line. It's a funny story, actually. That marathon I did the day before my first journey abroad, I was wearing a shirt that had Georgetown Hoyas, and someone said, "Go Hoyas," when they saw me. And this sweet, cute girl next to me, looked at me and made some sort of weird face. And she thought that they were saying that to her, and she was shocked that they knew she went to Georgetown. But in reality, they were saying it to me. So that created a conversation. Yeah. And we chatted for a good, 10 miles, which is 20 kilometers. But she was faster than me, by far. And I was trying to keep up with her just to talk to her. I'll never forget this. And she was saying how she was about to, either she just came from Kenya or was about to go to Kenya to do volunteer work. And I said, I'm going to do the same thing. And we were bonding. And I couldn't breathe and talk. So I was trying to remember all the dating advice I got in my life. where I would say like, she would ask me a question about like, so, where are you from? And I'd say, Pennsylvania. So, tell me about your childhood. Like, ask as many open-ended questions to get her talking. She'd talk for 5 minutes, and then she would say to me, so, where are you going next? And I would just give a one-word answer, and then eventually we stayed in touch and became friends. And
So how many marathons have you completed?
I'm happy to share that I hit my goal of 25 marathons just about maybe 2 months ago in Colombia. Yeah, what?
Let's get back to Tarek's interesting story of how the whole thing began in New York when he was helping a random woman on the street with some boxes. They started talking, and she had a dream to travel to 100 countries and start a social enterprise. And this was also Tarek's dream.
That woman I met in New York who inspired me with her dream life that of 100 countries and a social enterprise, they became my goals as well. But I didn't, it wasn't by design. It just sort of, I think it tapped into a part of me that felt, I'm going to go after something that I really admire. Mm-hmm. So a quick note on that. I bumped into that same woman randomly.
No.
Or serendipitously on the other side of the world in Bali.
No, you are kidding.
Yeah.
Did she remember you?
Well, fortunately, I had sent her an email that day saying, I'm the guy you randomly met. And I said, I hope to cross paths again one day. And she never wrote back. It wasn't nothing against her or anything. It was just, we never stayed in touch. So when I somehow crossed paths with her and she told me what she was up to, I thought this sounded so familiar. So I dug up that email that I sent to her that day. And sure enough, it was her. Wow. And we reconnected. And
so you met her again?
I met her again in Bali at this co-working place in Ubud. It's called Ubud, a very inspirational place with people that are.
I plan to go there. Definitely next year.
Yeah,
and stay a long time.
Oh yeah, it's definitely the place for connecting with people in a transformational phase who are doing good things for the world, who are trying to grow. And we reconnected at a startup weekend at that co-working place called Ubud. And then a couple years later, which was just a few months ago, I ran my first ever ultra marathon in Bali. 84 kilometers, double marathon from the top to the bottom of the island. And the long story short is that I got really sick the day before. I was really afraid that I wouldn't be able to run it, and it was a fundraiser to help support kids' education, and I was really concerned that I wasn't going to be able to do it, and it was the first time that I felt all eyes were on me. And I even had to go to the hospital and get some test results. And as I was waiting for those results in my hotel room that would, determine my fate of whether I could run this race, I was looking for like some reinforcement to give me some faith that everything's going to be okay. And I was carrying around this gift bag from the race organizers. And I decided to, as I was killing time, I looked at the bag and I turned it upside down and let all the goodies fall out. And what fell out was this bracelet, which I'm wearing right now, that says love. It's made by the same social enterprise, by that same woman, Chrissy, that I met in New York City 6 years earlier. And it came at the exact moment that I needed to sort of, a sign from the universe, as I say. And I like to think that at my lowest moment, the universe was sending me love.
It's so funny, the thing I said about Bali when I was in Brazil, that I hope to go there in the next year and stay longer. And that's exactly what I did, and where I met Tarek again. In the second half of the interview with Tarek, we'll hear more about the social enterprise he started, called Nomad's Giving Back. The whole thing started a few days earlier on the Nomad cruise that brought us to Brazil. We'll also get to hear what happened since and why he's here in Bali right now. So much more to come in the next episode. If you'd like to see Tarek's talk on the Nomad cruise that we talked about.
One serendipitous moment on a rainy summer day, walking through the bustling streets of New York City changed my life forever.
Head over to theradiovagabond.com. I put it there. My name is Palabo. See you tomorrow.